Hello everyone and welcome back to Just Finish Coding. This is part 7 of our 3D Elf Run series which we're making on Scratch 3. So without further ado, let's get right into it.
Just finished coding.
Now I have to interject here that if you've not watched parts 1 to 6, please watch them before you come here because as you can see, I'm picking up from where I left off, and for this video to make sense, you need to have watched the previous ones. I will leave a card for you right here. Please watch the videos and then come right back. If you're still here, I'm going to assume that you've watched parts 1 to 6, in which case let's get on with our score and high score. So now I can click on the score sprite, and here, like I said in the last video, you need to make a change within this the second else. So here you can do what I'm doing, and I'll explain the code in a second. So first you can grab letter of like this. Then within this letter of, you can first say letter of score, and within this you can grab a minus and put another minus within that minus, just like this. So first right at the beginning, you can put in the clone ID variable. Then after this, you can put in the length of score, and by length of score, I mean in the second part, okay, not in the first part, not in the middle, but in the third space for the minus. And length of score, obviously not length of apple. And right here, you can just put the number 5. Now you have to first understand how the score is actually set up in order to understand how this line of code is actually going to work out. So first you need to imagine that there are five score digits arranged right here from left to right, and the extreme left is going to be the score with a clone ID of 1, okay, and then it's going to be clone ID 2, clone ID 3, clone ID 4 and clone ID 5. So literally speaking, if the score for example had 5 digits on it, then the 5th letter of score would need to be our clone ID of 5 would need the 5th digit of score. So for example, the 5th digit would be the ones place, and if the score was for example 99999, then the digit would be 9, right? So we need the 5th digit. What this is really going to do is it's going to make sure that that particular digit is always given. So let's just take for example the clone ID as 1, okay? We are talking about, or let's take it as 5. 5 was the easiest. I'm going to take the clone ID as 5, and I'm going to take the length of the score as 1. So if the length of the score is 1, then this is going to evaluate to 4. This in turn is going to evaluate to clone ID is 5 minus 1, which is 5 minus 4, which in turn just gives 1 here, and it's letter 1 of score. Now here the score itself is just one number. For example, it may be 9, 8, whatever, and as a result we switch the costume to the correct costume. Now let's take the next case. Let's just say the score has 2 digits. Let's say it's 18 for example. Now in this case the clone number would remain the clone ID would remain as 5. Here we'd have length of score as 2, so this would be 5 minus 3, and this is going to evaluate to 2. But remember here our score has 2 digits, so it's going to be the second digit, and in this case it's going to be 8. So once again we switch to the correct costume. So it's just a nice mathy way of getting the correct digit from the score. Now this is going to work, and when we press the green flag and move our player around, you can see that the score changes incrementally, and that is pretty great. So that's going to be our entire score. I don't think we even need to do anything more on the sprite, and we can do pretty much the same thing in the high score. Okay, so you can grab a when I receive init, or actually I'm just going to throw in that code from the score. So you can just throw this like, okay, so we had the sprite change, which is what I didn't want, but we can throw this in pretty easily now. So chuck that in like this and like this. So there we go. We have all of this set up neatly. It saved a lot of time for sure, but we need to make a couple of changes here, because if you look at the costumes, you'd start to see that, well, we have a cloud as well. And this is just to signify what the high score really is. And I haven't made a variable for that, which I'm going to make right now. So you want to make sure that you click on cloud variable, because this is going to be a cloud variable. So you can just say high score all in caps because it's going to be for all sprites, and then click OK. So there we go, you can just close that warning in case it pops up for you. Now we will have to do a bit of setting up within the stage, but as of now you can just follow me along just like this. So first you want to make sure that the clone ID is initially set to 0, and then you'd want 6 clones, okay, not 5 but 6 clones. Each time we'll change it by 1, and we'll set the clone ID to be -1 in the end for the sprite. So just have an if clone ID is -1, then do nothing, and if that is not the case, we enter into all of this code. So we immediately want to grab an if then, okay, first, or actually an if else. So I made a small mistake there, but anyway. So now I can drag all this down, and we'll need we'll have basically 2 case scenarios. So the first case is if we have the high score's clone ID as 0 and the rest. So if the clone ID is equal to 0, then we just need to go to one particular location. So I will get to that location in a second, but you can just have it set up this way. And after that, what we need to do is make sure that the clone always has the costume of the cloud. So just say switch costume to cloud, and this will make sure that the costume switches in correctly. Now we have it like this. This will make sure that our costumes are changing properly, and obviously we need to change all the scores to high score. That's kind of obvious. But it's not just the costumes that we are trying to change here. We also need to make sure that the position is correct. So we can quickly change this to just clone ID times 14. And the reason I'm using 14 is because this has a much smaller size than the score. So obviously the size here is going to be set to 100. But if you look at the costume of the score and the high score, you'll start to see that the costumes are a lot smaller. So now I can get back into the high score variable. You can just chuck out this minus, by the way. And here you can change this position as well. So we'll have -234, and our Y is going to be right below the score. So it's going to be about 150. That's going to be our position. And we also need to make sure that we go to that position here. So just duplicate it like this and have a go to. This time we can just hard code the X value in. So we can just type in -234, and obviously this isn't going to work, okay? So if we just have this, then our cloud is going to be right over our first digit. And to make sure that that is nullified, we just change this by a small number, and this is going to work out. So -232 plus 14, right? So it's a gap of 16 basically for the cloud, and it's a gap, not a 16, yeah, it's a gap of 16 for the cloud, and it's a gap of 14 between the digits. So this is going to be pretty much it. So I think now if we hit the green flag and we run it, we should be getting the correct output. So now we can see, if you actually observe that, you would see that we never had our cloud showing up. And I'm pretty sure that the reason that happened was because I did something wrong. So I will go through my code once, and then I will be right back. Okay, so I found the errors, and it was kind of simple actually. So what was really happening was it was checking if the clone ID was 0, and it was switching the costume to the cloud. But since all of this code was within this else statement, we were never showing that particular cloud. So all you have to do is move this into a larger else statement, and you can also add in a go to back layer just so that things work out properly. So just say go backwards and 100 layers, that should be enough. And this would make sure that the cloud pops up perfectly. Now I will also set up the high score just to make sure stuff works out. And we can just say set high score to, and I'm going to set it to 10,000, just an arbitrary number. And then when we now press the green flag, you should see that we have our high score set up pretty neatly. I'm going to do one last thing before I end this video, and that is to reorganize this code and also add in a little high score update. So when we receive tick, I'm going to divide this into 2 forms of updates. So one is going to be the score updates, and we can do this pretty much instantaneously. So I know I'm actually not going to run without a screen refresh, although I could. This is just going to be incredibly fast anyways. So we'll have the score updates first, and in addition to just changing the score by 1, we also need to constantly be on the lookout for the score exceeding the high score. So to do that, you can grab an AND condition, and we can just have 2 conditions within this. So the first case is if the score is greater than the high score, and the second condition is if the high score is greater than 0, because otherwise it means that the game hasn't started or there's some bug currently happening. So if the high score is greater than 0, then all we have to do is just say set high score to whatever the score is, and the high score is going to be constantly updating. And you can actually see this if we just set the high score to 10 or something like that. So set it to 10, and now when we okay, so I just realized that there seems to be some form of bug. Let me try setting it to 1. Okay, we have come on, I think that was just a momentary lapse with the scratch editor. I'm not entirely sure what happened there, but now when we press the green flag and then we move around, you can see that the high score constantly keeps updating as well. Now obviously you can keep playing, and as a result the high score would keep going up, but I'm pretty sure that you get the idea. Once we have all the crashes, once we have the restarting of the game set up, the high score works pretty great. And I'm going to end this video here. In the next video we'll probably get into making sure that the player restarts and how the player bumps into the obstacles, and in the last video we'll fix up the thumbnail as well as the sound effects. If you've enjoyed this video, please make sure you leave a like, and also don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.